Hey, everybody, my name is Brad Montgomery. We are live with Reverend James Harlan. James, we're going to start right off. James Harlan is the chief bottle washer. He's the top dog. He's the rector at Bethesda by the Sea, and I'm so glad you were
Right.
here, James. So we
Thanks.
were just talking about people putting you on a pedestal, and I want to ask you about that because it must be
Yeah,
weird. And
it's
to,
very
to,
weird.
ta- to ask you the question, I'm going to tell you a story about me. So I promise this is about you. Just stay put. I was talking to one of my buddies who's also a motivational speaker, and I was talking about that awkward time after our speeches. So I'm not a celebrity, but in that hotel following my keynote, I am a celebrity for that,
Right.
until I walk out the hotel door.
Sure.
And I was telling my buddy, isn't it weird when people kind of project upon us that we're amazing and I feel so awkward and they're buying my book and they just can't wait and I feel very awkward with it. And she took me to task, James. And
Hmm.
she said, "How dare you? They're projecting whatever they need on you, and your job is to fulfill that for them, at least for the hour you're with them, and then walk out the door and it's over." But so yes, there is a chasm between reality and what they're projecting.
Yeah.
But my job, according to my friend, is to allow them to have that. My job is temporary, meaning I'm up there for
Yeah.
an hour and then I leave the hotel and
Yeah.
I'm no longer celebrity. Your job is full time.
Yeah.
So I am really eager, James, to talk to you about what it's like to wear that collar. And I know people treat you differently. So I'm not talking about while you're in the pulpit. I'm just talking about in life.
Yeah.
What do people? How do they treat you? Because it
It,
must be different.
it is. It is different, and it is because it's my life, and you may not know this, but this is all I've done since age 20. I started working in a church in the middle of my college years at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and this is all I've done since then. So that's at least 15 years that I've done this. But But it is, and I remember the first time I put a clerical collar on and went out in public, and it was in Boston actually, which is a very Catholic city. And I mean, people practically genuflect in front of you, and it's like, "Oh, Father, good day, Father. Father, how are you? Oh, let me get out of there, Father. Let me get that door, Father. Father this and Father that." Like somehow, it's it's almost like people think, whether they think it or not, it's almost like they think that if I'm really nice to this person, they must be particularly close to God, and that will get me closer to God, or something like that, or it'll get me um, a little more credit to get into heaven or something. Um, and so people will suddenly, they'll stop cussing, they'll hide their drink, all these things will happen when you have this collar on, and it's very strange. But the other side of it, Brad, that's cool is, and this has happened a number of times, and what it's supposed to represent ideally is a priest saying, "I'm here to help, I'm here to serve, I'm here to be a caring presence for you." At its best, that's what it is. And there are times I was walking to a hospital in the middle of this pandemic, um, and to be with a family whose the dad had just died, and I was going to do last rites with wife and the kids, and and before I even got in, there was someone I had never met at the door. "Oh, Father, will you pray for us?" And so I stopped and I said, "Of course I will. Tell me what's going on." And we had this 15-minute conversation. And you have this chance to really touch someone and be with someone. And so the collar, no one ever would have done that had I not been wearing that collar.
Right.
Um, but here's the interesting thing though about it that I found. So I live in Palm Beach, which is a very different kind of world, where people
Very different
are,
kind
where
of
it's
planet.
full of, what's that?
It's a different kind of planet.
It really is. And people here are really important. And there's a sort of culture of, I need people to know how important I am without my telling them. And I need people to treat me that way. So people dress a certain way and they drive a certain car and they want their names on certain plaques and on the lists of who's on what board and all those kinds of things. So when I got here, I wore this every day for a little while. And I realized that what it was communicating here wasn't, "I'm here to serve, I'm here to care, I'm here to be a presence for you." People were reading it as I thought they should treat me as important, which was the opposite of what I wanted. I don't want to be
Oh.
important. I'm not important. I'm here to serve.
Wait,
And so
wait,
I
wait.
actually stopped wearing.
You're
Yeah.
saying you wore the collar and people thought you were posing.
Well, I think they thought I was a priest, but I think they thought I was a priest who needed to be treated
Right.
importantly.
All right. That's
Yeah. So I thought if that's what it's going to mean, I started wearing a button-down shirt every day and not even a tie or a coat. So people would kind of go, he doesn't even dress right. He must not be important. That's right. I'm not important. And so I wear this, I wear this for sort of official things and Sundays and that kind of thing, but I don't wear it every day here.
well, you're
Yeah.
important to me.
Funny. Thank you, Brad.
Well, yeah, so that
Yeah.
we're kind of on it. If you feel like I'm not asking you a specific question, it's because I don't have it articulated in my own noggin. But I have learned as I age that people project upon me like, oh, that guy's whatever. Was on stage. So if I, for example, James, give them a compliment, a
Yeah.
well meant one, it seems to carry more weight than if I'm
Right.
the kid behind the counter at McDonald's, just because of what they have given me, what there is in their head. And I'm thinking that for you, they just have this image of who you are. Like those strangers in the hospital had
They do.
no clue if you had anything in common with them, yet they wanted something from you.
Right. Yeah. And they want, and then what they want is not something from James. They want something from the priest. They want something from that religious sort of part of themselves, of the world they grew up in, that sense of that connection to the divine, to the, the spiritual. And so, when you're in that place, when I'm in that place, it's less about me, the person, and more about me and this role that I have. And I think one of the challenges is sort of keeping those distinct. It's why, we laughed about, it's so weird that the priest has a bourbon collection, but it's not weird that I have a bourbon collection. It's perfectly okay for me to do that. And I like a little, as we say, a wee dram every once in a while. But yeah, and it's not uncommon that people can't separate those two and can't. Well, it's like, Brad, it's not unlike, do you remember the first time you saw one of your teachers outside of the classroom? When you were a kid, did you ever
Yeah,
like run into your
yeah, I
grocery
do.
store? What is my teacher doing in the
Very
grocery
odd.
store? They're not supposed to be here. Right. And so it's the same thing with a priest. People are fine seeing, they don't know what a priest is outside of the church, outside of that religious sort of world that we live in. And so it kind of throws people off sometimes.
I'm wondering we're getting deep here. Are you ready? I hadn't
I'm
thought
ready.
about it before because I have thought about some stuff I want to talk to you about, but I hadn't thought of this one. You are not in that category, and I'm not implying that. But when we read about the Catholic Church and all of the
Yeah.
problems some of those priests got into with their parishioners going way out of bounds,
Right.
part of that is the power that the collar has, right?
It's absolutely that, Brad. And
So
I'll
you
tell
know
you,
that you have that.
I've listen. So way back when I actually was serving in a church, actually even before I was a priest, where the one of the priests caused a scandal. It wasn't a child sexual abuse scandal, but it was scandalous enough. And I watched this, and I really thought there was a time, Brad, when I thought, if that's the road, if this is if being really good at this means, you're the higher they are, the harder they fall, or something like that. I'm like, I don't think I need to do this. And there was a time when I was getting ready to go to seminary, and I was sort of reflecting on this, praying about this, sort of having that, if you will, that conversation with God. Although when I say that, I don't mean I hear an audible voice from God. I personally never have, but sort of having that conversation and saying, I'm only going to do this if I can just be myself. If I don't have to make this a career advancing thing, if I don't have to, I'm only going to do this if I can be real and be honest and be true and not get put up on that pedestal. So I really sort of get wary of that pedestal,
Yeah,
and
but that's
that
what I'm so
kind of
curious
stuff.
about,
But it's
James.
but it's
Even though
but
you're
there is huge power, Brad. There's huge power, because people are. I think human beings are inherently spiritual somehow. Whether they're religious or not is different. But I think people are inherently spiritual, and for a lot of people, that this role, this and the sort of the visible trappings of it carries an inordinate amount of power for some people. And it's very easy to get seduced into thinking the rules don't apply to you. That if you're doing it, it must be holy and right because you're a person of God and you can do no wrong, kind of thing. And I think clergy, when they get unhealthy and stressed, can sort of live in this deluded place where they start believing what people say about them or think about them, and that they can do no wrong. And it's very, very dangerous. That's why I have a counselor that I meet with 3 to 6 times a year. just to keep me grounded and to keep me honest and to have a place where I can be human and be myself. And he's a clergy person of a different denomination, and he gets what life in a congregation is like. But I've got to have those places to sort of
Right.
stay sane and healthy about it, because it's very easy to get sucked into that. And to be clear, it's not just the Catholic Church that has those problems. They're a huge religious body, and so it's very visible because they're global. But we've had those same scandals and those same problems in the Episcopal Church, and have had the lawsuits and all those kinds of things, and have, thankfully, out of it, have gotten much more careful about our safeguards and the ways we do programs for children and youth and all those kinds of
Well,
things.
let me go. Gosh, you're easy to talk to. Let me go backwards though, because I hear you. You say that being on that pedestal can present a danger and it can
Yes.
become
Yeah.
seductive. And you've taken specific steps, for example, not wearing your collar all
Yeah.
the time
Right.
to make sure you're not there. But dude, you're on that pedestal.
Yeah.
You can't just wish yourself off because you say you don't have a
Nope.
collar on.
No.
So then I'm guessing there are times though that you can use that power for good that is totally fun for you.
Yeah, you can. Certainly, you can have an influence, and I hope. Yeah, I mean, I hope that people like me, that people like you. I mean, you've got a platform too, and I think, I hope that at our best, we're it's inspiring people, it's encouraging people, it's helping people. It's it becomes less about what people think of me, and it becomes more about people seeing themselves in a new light, seeing the best they can
Yeah.
be, deciding that there's actually work they can do to make the world a better place, to be of service to someone, to be an instrument of love or hope or reconciliation or something like that.
I like that language because you know that I'm not a religious guy.
Right.
Uh, so like that language is so comfortable to me more than be in service to God because I feel like the two are consistent, but I don't know, for some reason that language
Yeah. I
like,
mean, I think they're the same. I mean, so for me, obviously for me, I mean, my world, my worldview, my life every day is grounded in this relationship with God, in this spiritual realm, in this life of sort of prayer and worship and all those kinds of things. But that has no integrity if it's not also um, a serious, almost gut wrenching, sometimes painful look at the world and the world's pain and what we can do about it, right? Um, and so I hope what happens is the joy, the happiness, the passion comes out in seeing the potential for care, concern, service to the world. And I would say, being theological about it, that's what God asks of us. But
well, because
one doesn't need to be religious to do that.
we work in such different environments. Because like in my
Yeah.
world, in the mostly corporate and association healthcare, I can't use any of those words. They'll
No.
just think I'm bonkers,
Yeah.
and then two, they'll be like, dude, come on, seriously, you can't talk like that here.
Yeah.
Whereas that is your life. You are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you're in your job.
Hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Um, yeah, but I guess, and I know this isn't always true with religious people, but I think we have a lot of common ground, Brad, you and I, and what we do and how we do it and that kind of thing. And I think that's at least as interesting, maybe probably more interesting than what's different about it. I mean,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So,
what I mean, what's different is good because it helps point out what we have in common and what's beautiful about that.
so do you consider yourself to be a motivational speaker?
I do. I mean, I think preaching is kind of that. Yeah. At its best, again, for me, preaching is not teaching. Preaching is not, and it's not just, sometimes preaching is helping people see the error of their ways and some of that, but most of it is helping people see the goodness and the hope and the possibility of doing something more, and getting out, helping people get outside themselves, right? Um, and to
Yeah.
realize let me, or to put it another way, the best way, I think, my motivational sort of platform is to say the best way for you to meet those basic needs you have for peace and happiness and all that is to, get out of yourself and care for others, and you'll find exactly what you're looking for.
Right. That is exactly like that is
Right.
completely consistent with
Right.
everything I think every motivational speaker on the planet talks about.
Sure.
Because I feel as though, and I kind of grew into this, James. 'Cause and forgive me, because even as I think about it, it sounds sort of campy and cliche, but I feel deeply that everyone needs to be told they have more. Like, you have greatness,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
you don't even know what it is yet, and I don't.
Right.
It's great. Go get it.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. And I would put it in, of course, I would put it in a theological way as a preacher and say that we were created, in this beautiful image of God. We're created, um, I don't mean ears and mouth and nose, I mean character qualities. And there's the person that God sees in us, which is, and I think, again, a lot of religious people say, God will see you do that terrible thing and be angry. I think God sees the beauty in us. God sees only the beauty with which we're created. God takes such great delight in us. And so for me, that's the potential. I would put it that way and say, let's draw that out. Let's see what God sees in ourselves and one another,
Yeah,
because it's
I
pretty
got it.
amazing. Yeah. That's how I put it theologically.
All right, let me pivot here just for a little bit. You and I are old enough that we're seen as senior to some people, right?
Oh,
And then
God.
also both of us have jobs that
No.
some people look up to. And so I just know, without asking, you have done this before. You give a compliment, something very straightforward, and then you hear this. Coming from you, that means a great deal.
Yeah.
So the question is, does that make you, I mean, like, do you start to stretch that out? Like, wow, these compliments are really powerful. I need to do more of that. And is that something you've been tactical about?
Yeah. And absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think it's not just compliments. It's also, if I have something uh, sort of critical, or I have to say, I need this done differently next time, kind of thing, can absolutely be devastating to someone in a way that
Mhm.
it shouldn't be, right? So the flip side of that is also true, that you got to pay attention. I have to pay attention, and I don't all the time as well as I should, to how those
That's
things impact people. Yeah.
that's right. If you say, hey, barista, this coffee was made wrong," they're like, "God hates me."
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a problem the rest of us do not have to worry about. I
Yeah.
made the
Yeah.
bad coffee. I'm going to hell. We don't have to worry
Yeah.
about that, James.
Don't have heard of that. Right.
I hadn't thought about that. You carry a baggage that's positive, but also I can see that you better watch yourself.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and the other piece of it, Brad, that's funny, it's kind of funny about it, is like um, probably my first or second year I was here, I just made a quick run to the grocery store, which is up the street in Palm Beach. And I was in shorts and a polo, dressed perfectly respectably, but not dressed as a priest. And I heard about it from several people. Why are you going out dressed like that?
Oh
You need to be
no.
dressed properly. Yeah. So my wife will tell you, I stopped going to the grocery store after that. I'm like, not worth it.
That's how
You
you got
go.
out of that chore?
I know, right?
Oh no,
Perfect.
honey, I can't.
I can't, because it just ends up being this whole thing about, and they'll critique what's in my grocery cart. Did you know the rector buys, non-organic eggs, or I don't know what it is. I don't know, but, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a few personal items you don't want to put in your
Yeah.
cart. But your wife, because she's the rector's wife, she's famous too, right?
Yeah. And the thing about Palm Beach is, I'm kind of a big fish in a small pond. There's this town of 10,000 people and no one really works here. I mean, right? Everyone here, this life in Palm Beach centers around, the clubs, the arts organizations, and the religious institutions. That's really what's here. And so there are 6 houses of worship on the island. We're the biggest by far. And so, yeah, I'm kind of a big fish in a small pond. I mean, people, yeah, our life is very visible.
But does that
It's
mean
crazy.
your wife also gets
Yeah.
comments if she's not properly dressed
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
puts junk food in the cart?
Totally. Yep.
So if you want to go buy certain things, which we'll leave unmentioned, you got to drive away.
Amazon.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, of course.
Right. Mailer is a beautiful thing.
And what would be an example of something you have to buy from Amazon because it's too awkward?
Yeah. Bourbon. Right. Yeah.
Oh, right.
No.
I knew
Yeah.
you were going to answer that. I wasn't sure how you had. Well played.
There
All
you
right.
go.
So what's it like? You are Father James, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I use that. I'll tell you a funny story about Father James. I use that not because I care. I mean, call me James. Doesn't, you're not going to offend me. Call me, as long as you don't call me something mean spirited, I'll probably answer and be perfectly fine. Um, but Father James helps because it kind of communicates this role again. It communicates at its best. I'm here to serve. I'm here to care. I'm here to listen. Um, but the funny thing is, when I was in the Navy, I was a chaplain in the Navy for a few years, and a command gets congressional inquiries sometimes that we're mistreating, we're not taking care of someone's family the way we should or something like that. And I was always the one to return those congressionals because I get on the phone with the senator or the congressperson's office and I'd say, hi, this is Father Harlan. I'm the chaplain at, wherever. And they wouldn't get mad. They wouldn't argue with me. They'd be like, oh, well, it must be okay. Oh, Father. Yes, Father. Yes. Well, yes, of course we can help you with this. And I took care of them. So it has some use.
Well, so when, how you were young when you became Father James? When was that?
I was young and single. Yeah. I became a priest at age 28. Yeah.
And so right when you're a priest, you're suddenly Father James.
Yep. Yeah.
That had to be weird the first time someone calls you Father James, right?
It's funny. Well, yeah, it's weird and it's funny because there are people just very, you're younger than my grandchildren. I can't call you father. And I'm like, I don't care call me father or not. I don't care. Why is it a problem for you? It's not for me. So people do or they don't. It doesn't bother me. But yeah, it's a little strange.
But how long did it take you to get used to that? Hearing Father James going, "Oh, they're talking about me."
Yeah, I don't remember, to be honest, Brad. It's been that long ago. It's just always been part of the world for me.
Yeah, isn't that funny how we, once you do it long enough, it just is.
Yeah, you do it long enough. Yeah.
Let's pivot. I am a performer. For a
Yep.
living, I stand in front of audiences and I yap. And I am judged on that. And that's how it works. I'm either good or I'm not, and that is reflected in my income. You are the same flipping thing. You stand
Yeah.
up in front of groups and you yap and you are judged on that and people
Yeah.
criticize you and cheer you on.
Sure.
So I'm eager, I'm really eager to talk at the performance side of your job.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to get good? Comics and speakers, we tend to talk about stage time. That you can
Yeah.
have natural ability and you can have skills and tactics and technique, but really there's no substitute for stage time, just doing it repeatedly.
Absolutely.
How do you guys think about that? Because yes, you're called by this very religious, important thing in the background that the rest of us are not, but yet you got to perform. So
It's a performance. It is, sure. Yeah, I have a colleague who's a priest at a church in Southern California where, everyone is a performer of some sort, right? Everyone's an actor or a producer or something. And this colleague, they pointed out that that when actors have in their contract, I can't remember what they call it. They call it something like half hour. And what it is if your call is at 2 p.m., you're not to disturb the talent after 1:30. They need time to get themselves centered and focused and ready to sort of do what they're supposed to do. And they were making the point, clergy should do that. We should have that time to get centered and breathe and get connected with God, with all those things before we go do, lead a service and preach a sermon and all those kinds of things. But the fact is, right before a service, everyone's like, someone didn't light the candles. Someone didn't show up to read that, do this thing and whatever. And you're tending to all these other things. So, and I preach generally when I preach with no notes. They do it extemporaneously. And it's really hard with all the other distractions then to suddenly, stand up and sort of say what I plan to say for 9 to 12 minutes.
So what is your technique? So
yeah.
Have you written it out word for word ahead of time?
No, generally I don't. I sort of have sort of the journey that the touchstones, the journey that I want to go on really is kind of how I look at it. And for me, it just works better to do it knowing where I want to go and having certain phrases that I know I want to include. I have a really good memory, so it works for me. Certain phrases that I want to make sure I use, but then doing it extemporaneously because you're with the congregation and it's interactive. It's not the same for me. It's not the same to just speak this into a void of nobody, right? It's about, like you said earlier, this is an ongoing relationship for me. It's not a one-off and then I'm on a plane out of there. And so that, any one of those sermons, while it's a performance, it's also part of an ongoing life together that we have, right? So it's part of a larger conversation. That's why the interactive part of it matters. And so it's been so weird in the last 9 months because there's been no one in church. I literally, my Christmas Eve sermon, I stood up in the pulpit with no one in the church and preached to no one.
And there's some tech guy in a different room
Some tech guy in another room, yeah, doing the video cameras and all that. And so for that one, I wrote it out because I knew there was no way to do it extemporaneously with no one there. So I wrote that one out. But so the thing is, Brad, here's the one thing I would say about it, and this sounds overly pious, and forgive me for sounding overly pious for a minute, but I think when I felt at my best, I haven't needed the affirmation. I haven't needed the compliments. I've known that there was some sense that I spoke what I was led to speak that day, what I was called to speak. I spoke God's word that day, and it wasn't about me. And at my worst, I'm totally lacking in self-confidence, and I'm craving those sort of, Father James, that really spoke to me kind of stuff, right?
Well, I would say not at your worst. I would say that is human.
Well, yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Okay. You're fair. Yeah, fair enough.
Because all of us, even the most accomplished amongst us, I'm convinced, unless you're a narcissist, you're wondering, like, am I doing that right? Am I a fraud?
Yeah. Did this work? Did I have any impact on anyone? Right.
Right. Do I suck at my job? I can't tell.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting for me is, as I look back on the years of doing this, I don't think I would say there's sort of a linear progression of improvement. If that makes sense. I think I could look back of preaching, of the quality of my performing or preaching. I would say there are times when I've been sort of in the zone and really just effective and peaceful and confident and excited about it, and times when I just have not had any of that. And it's not a matter of losing or forgetting the skills either, right? I mean, the skills certainly have developed over time, and I'm a lot more confident in my skills to do that effectively than I was 20 years ago. But it's those intangible things, I think, that for me, at least, I don't know if it's true for you, that I can look back and say there was a period when I was really feeling really effective at this, and some others where I was just like, I'm not, it's not working for some reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have those times?
I've had those moments, or even not moments, like whole phases where, like, I was out there doing it, and they were calling me, which was nice, and the audience was clapping at the right times and laughing at the right times, but I just knew I wasn't hitting it.
Yeah.
So I want to go. Let's talk about bombing, but I want to go back to your 9 to 11 minutes of no notes. You don't have a note card with bullet points or nothing?
Not generally. No, oftentimes I'm just standing at the top of the stairs without anything in front of me. That's what I prefer. We have Bethesda's this old Gothic church. So there's a pulpit that's like 8 steps up, and there's this big stone thing, and it's towering over everyone else, which we love because there's that it's that power thing again and all that. But I prefer, and so I preach there because that's where people sort of seems to work there. I would just as soon stand at the top of the steps in the middle with nothing in front of me and talk, because I think that's more, it feels authentic. It's not about being eloquent. It's about being authentic for me. Mm-hmm. And it feels like I can be more authentic that way. But yeah,
it's funny. Authentic.
So yeah.
Authentic is a word that comics and speakers use all the time. Like, it can
huge, isn't it?
Right. If you look too canned, you suck. Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've both seen colleagues, right? I've seen priests who stand up there in that sort of, with that stained glass voice. We like to use the term. I don't know if you've ever heard the term, the stained glass voice. Today I will take my text from the Gospel according to John. And they're from Kansas City, and you're like, that's not how you talk, dude. When you're down here having lunch, that is not what you sound like, and that's not how you act. And get over yourself. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's funny, because I've noticed that that kind of preacher cadence.
Yeah.
So you're aware of that, and you're saying you don't have one.
I probably do some, but I think it's better when I have less of it. I think it's better. I think I'm a better preacher when I sound preaching like I sound right now. Just we're talking.
Yeah. Well, for my taste, totally. Because then you're a guy I'm relating to.
Right.
Stained glass voice. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. Isn't that a great term?
That is fantastic.
I love it. Yeah.
So there is no comedian or speaker who's a real speaker who can't say, like, oh, I've bombed hundreds of times.
Yeah.
I have a career of bombing. Does that happen in your job?
Totally.
What's that look like to bomb as a priest?
Well, it can be a lot of different things. I think Well, the first thing I thought of is not what does it look like, but what brings it about. And I think, there are weeks where just there've been one crisis after another and no time really to prepare.
Mm.
And so it's not going to be as good because you just haven't had the time you need to get really something thoughtful and cogent put together.
That must stress you
Um,
out to go up there knowing I'm not ready.
I got nothing here. Yeah, it's not very fun. And the others are just someone it'll happen. I'll be all ready and everything's good, and right before the service, someone will come and say and just rip me up. Father James, I can't believe I can't believe you have orange flowers on the altar this week. How dare you? You're the worst priest. And then you're supposed to go and be sort of prayerful and focused and all that kind of stuff. And it's really hard. so I think when I think about bombing, those are the things I think about. And
Yeah,
so you
you
just get
know,
up and like, how can I even be effective
yeah.
when and people don't, it's really, yeah, that stuff's hard.
I'm so interested in the similarities between our jobs, and
Yeah.
there are exceptions to this. But when I look in my recent professional history, the times I've bombed is when I've been set up badly,
Sure.
and I think that's what you just said. Like
I think
for
that's
some
right.
reason,
Yeah.
someone sabotages you beforehand
Yep.
mentally or whatever, or
Absolutely.
pulls your mind in a bad place, and that's
Yeah.
when. And
Well, yeah, and sometimes for good reasons. I mean, the fact is, if and this has happened, if you get the call on Tuesday that mom and dad were killed in a car crash, leaving 7 kids behind, 6 kids, whatever it was, um, that's an appropriate distraction. I mean, that you've got to focus on that. You can't just that Sunday sermon, that speaking that in front of everyone, time is really important, but sometimes you just got to say, you know what, I got to take care of this family.
yeah,
These kids are grieving and they're scared and they're, they need a presence that's calm, that's not anxious, that can be reassuring, and I got to go do that,
yeah,
right? And so there are those two. There are those times when you go, well, I did everything I could do this week, and it'll be okay. It won't. It'll be the sermon might bomb, but that's okay. Does that make sense? In those
right.
situations, I'm
Well,
good with it in that kind of
but
context.
I would think it'd be comforting for you knowing, as you said, you have a kind of an ongoing relationship. Your sermon is not a
Yeah,
standalone.
yeah,
It's one out
right.
of hundreds they're going to see. So
Hundreds. That's right.
that I would think gives you a little leeway.
I would hope so. And you hope that you hope too, Brad, different from your context, that in a life we're living together, there's people will extend you some grace if you're not at your best on any particular day, right? It's like, yeah, we know Father James, we know what he's capable of, and we know maybe it's fine. We'll be okay. We love him, and so at our best, that's what we do for one another. That doesn't always happen, but we hope for that,
I want that because
right?
my
No, and I imagine you don't get any of that in your role.
no, when I walk out there,
No.
they're the first, what, I don't know how many seconds or minutes, they're like trying to decide if they're going to leave the room. They
Yeah,
they have no obligation or interest in me,
right,
and my audiences did not pick me. Someone else picked me,
right.
thinking, "Oh, this person will be a good person to place in front of their audience." The poor random person in the third row doesn't know
Right.
me or care, or
Yeah.
so I
See,
would.
that's more what it's like for me at a wedding or a funeral,
Oh, right,
right?
strangers. You got strangers
Yeah.
there.
So those are congregations of people that are they're not there to see me. They're there to celebrate with this couple or grieve the loss of someone they love. And here I am. And same thing. They're like, do I even need to pay any attention to this man at all? And hopefully, again, you have something to say that is
Mhm.
inspiring, you know, hopeful, encouraging.
So, are you? You're funny and upbeat in person. Are you funny and upbeat on the podium?
I hope
What do you call
so.
that? Not a podium,
Pulpit.
pulpit. Right. Sorry.
Pulpit. Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I think humor, um, uh, here's the thing, Brad. I've listened to too many dry, boring, overly pious sermons, and I don't like listening to them, and so I try not to give them. And so certainly some are more serious than others, but I think there's got to be in the grand scheme, there's got to be some lightheartedness. There's got to be some levity. There's got to be. I mean, the fact is, the other thing about it is I'm no better than anyone in that congregation. I am not a better person. I am not a more godly person. I'm not more loved by God than anyone there. I am none of those things. And so I think part of what I need to do, at least for me, is be enough sort of self-effacing and humorous um, to feel like we're in this together. Right? I'm not there to
Yeah,
fix everyone. I'm not there to tell them they're wrong and I'm right. I'm there to sort of encourage us to live a life together, to challenge ourselves, to
right. Well,
all that kind of stuff.
I've always thought that humor is a massive connector. And
Right.
if you can make people laugh, there's a lot of studies that they trust you more,
Yeah.
they listen
Yep.
harder, they lean in. Um,
Yeah.
and that's got to be true in your job. Tell
Yep.
me, when I'm a very, my peers would say, Brad barely has a plan up there. I'm pretty loose on stuff. And that's my strength. So for me, the best jobs are the jobs when something or hopefully many things happen during my
Yeah.
program that I get to react to.
Right.
So someone has a stupid question or a funny question or someone falls down or just lights go off, anything. I just want anything
Right.
out of the ordinary. So now it's to you. How do you handle when you're on the pulpit those weird surprises?
Yeah. So it's interesting because at a Sunday service, 9 to 12 minutes of it is sort of that speaking, that preaching, that sermon part, right? The rest of it is this service where the words are, at least for Episcopalians, it's all sort of set out, right? And they're prayers that we're praying that are sort of written, and they're common. They're the same prayers we're praying that people are praying in, uh, England and India and New Zealand and all over the world. And so that part, spontaneity really doesn't help much because the rhythm of it is what sort of gets us into sort of a deeper spiritual place, and we're doing it together. And so we're praying together and we're singing together. Not anymore, not this year, by the way. The pandemic's shot all that to hell. But usually we're doing this together. And then the sermon is this whole different sort of interaction, right? It is interactive, and it is. Although people don't generally, sometimes I'll ask a question and wait for answers from people, but generally, even though it's sort of conversational, no one else is actually speaking than me. But I, in the sermon, I love it when someone reacts or something happens, and you just have to make light of it and go with it. And it makes it sort of a more honest and real time.
Mm.
But in the rest of the service, it actually can be. I mean, I don't stress about it, but it can be a distraction. I want things, and my staff will tell you, I want things exactly right for that. Let's plan it. We know what we're doing. And the most caring we can be at that point is to be very attentive to details and do it prayerfully and do it right.
Are you a type A guy?
Yeah. You knew that.
Well,
I
how
am,
does that
yes.
manifest other than wanting that service to
Uh,
be just so?
yeah, well, I'll tell you, Brad, when I get stressed, I get a little obsessive. I mean, I get like, I really do want everything perfect and in order and all that kind of stuff. It's not the healthiest James, but that's the James that sort of comes out when I'm stressed or unhappy or in conflict or something like that.
But
Yeah.
it's probably your
But even,
superpower and your kryptonite.
I think it's both. Yeah, because I think the fact is what people would say about Bethesda that's true, and it's not, again, it's not true of me, but they would say that our worship for people who value that, who are looking for that it has this sort of transcendent, deep spiritual foundation to it that they value. And it does that because we pay very close attention to all the little things that make that work and work very hard at it. And then they'd say that the preaching is authentic and thought-provoking and challenging to them and inspiring. And I think that's a great combination for our mission, for who we're trying to be. And I think we do it fairly well. And it's not just me. We're a big church, so I've got a staff of 25 and 5 other clergy, and so it's, I share a lot of this, but it's cool.
What you've kind of hinted towards it a couple times. What is a compliment that you love? And I'll give you an example. I I'm known for being funny on stage, but my favorite compliment looks like this. It's a older guy, like a quiet, buttoned up, silent guy who people will kind of lurk around me right afterwards. And there's that guy. He's kind
Yeah.
of a few steps away, waiting for everyone else to clear and to come up, and he'll say something like, "I usually hate this crap, but that was really good."
Yeah.
And
This
I
is
just
okay.
and sometimes they have a little, they're not crying, but they're a little wet in their eyes.
Yeah,
And
a
so
little
that
there. Yeah,
means
right there.
I didn't
Sure.
say anything sad, but they got something on that is
Yeah,
happening. That is
totally.
my favorite. So what does a compliment look like when it feels
So what
good?
it looks like for me, and again, this is going to sound overly pious, but you asked, so I'll say it. So let me preface it by saying, so when I'm in church, I'm wearing, all these robes, right? This long white thing and these big fancy just layers of just gorgeous vestments. And the part of the point of those is that they sort of remove from the equation the minister's sort of personal identity and personal taste. They put on the office the role that they have in that time of worship, and it's not about personal expression, right? It's not about personal taste. It's I'm there in that role, and that's less so in preaching than in leading worship, right? Because preaching is personal. It has to be about me and be authentic. But I often say the best compliments are about someone coming and telling me that something happened within them or within their family or something like that, and they almost forgot I was part of it. The compliment is, I felt some sense of God there. I felt some inspiration to do something different. I felt something deeper, and 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 if they forget that I was part of it, that's the best.
Wait, so
Now, it never happens that
this is
way, but I
after
don't want the credit. Yeah, but I don't want the credit for it, right? I don't want the credit. I want this to be about that person's own spiritual journey. I don't need to be part of their spiritual journey. I need to sort of push, nudge them, encourage them into that spiritual journey and get out of the way and let them have that spirituality, that relationship with God, whatever you want to call it. I don't need to be a part of that. And so if I'm suddenly out of the way and they've forgotten I'm there, that's a good thing.
But there must be something that feels really good. Like my job was to make them feel something, and they just told me they did.
Exactly.
So
Right.
that makes you feel warm,
That's it. Absolutely. Yeah, but they don't need to give me credit for it. They felt something, yes, but I didn't do it.
right? But
Right?
I call bullshit. The-
No, I know. I told you it sounds overly pious, but you can call bullshit. But I'm sticking by it, Brad.
right, but if it was a less articulate or less charismatic or less skilled priest, they wouldn't have had that feeling. So the element that is James Harlan is
Yes.
relevant.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say is yes, it is relevant, and I take it as a compliment to me. I'll take it as a good job, but it's more of a compliment if they don't compliment me, is what I'm trying to say.
I get it.
I feel like I've done a better job when I've disappeared out of it, right?
Yeah, I
If
hear
they're
you.
attributing it to me, then it's still too much about me. If they're attributing it to the sense of spirituality, the worship that happened, the whole community, all that, I've done my job better, and I feel
Yeah, I
better
hear
about
you. Okay, I retract my bullshit.
it. Can you do that?
I don't well, I don't know. You're the
I don't know how that
priest. You
works.
tell me. I'm pretty sure I'm going to hell
All
for
right.
that one. Uh, oh, dang it! There was something I was about to ask you, and I lost it because we were joking about bullshit.
Hmm.
Let's talk about confidence. I've known you for a long time. You have always been very confident.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we both can agree that in any profession or even a hobby or any task, people who are more confident seem to perform better than people who are less confident.
Yeah.
And often, I can't figure out how to manufacture that confidence. So, for example, we both have kids. You can't just tell your kids to be confident. Like, come on, believe in yourself. You're doing great. Because that just doesn't work. They have to earn it somehow. Do you like what do you tell your staff and what do you tell your kids and
Yeah.
people, youth in your church, when you see they're lacking confidence? How do you nurture them? Like, what are your
I,
younger
you know,
priests? How do you
that's,
tell them to do that?
I think that, so for me, that's a spiritual question. That's a religious question for me. And I know you didn't mean to frame it that way, but for me it is. Sorry. But what I mean by that is I think, um, for me, that sense of confidence comes from a sense of inner peace, comes from the really deep knowledge that becomes conscious that I am just profoundly loved and beautiful. And no human being can change that. That's who I am. And when I am sort of prayerful and grounded in that, that's where my confidence comes from. I don't need to impress anyone at my best.
That makes me jealous a little bit because I don't have that.
Yeah. I don't a lot of the time. I mean, I have plenty of crises of confidence and, asking why the heck am I here? And am I any good at all? And all those kinds of things. But yeah, but when it comes from the right place, that's where it comes from. And I think, I try to cultivate that in colleagues and in staff as well. That this is, we're not, what we're doing is, and who we are, even more than what we're doing, who we are, our identity is pleasing to God who created us. And so if that's true, then, do we have to worry that much about what others think?
Yeah, but for me, just saying that doesn't make it true. I still have to
Well,
walk
right.
there in
So I
front of
think,
the
yeah,
audience and
so
do it.
sure. And I
Yeah,
think that's why I would say that's a big part of what, at its best, a religious practice, a religious life is about, is sort of cultivating that in a community where you sort of support each other in that and help each other see that in themselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I feel jealous because I think it would be very comforting. And
Yeah.
as a guy who, I don't know if I'm a non-believer, but I'm a doubter at least. And,
So am I,
I just
for
doesn't,
what it's worth.
oh, say that again, James.
I'm a doubter too. I have doubts about me, about us, about the world, about all that stuff. Not necessarily about, I don't necessarily doubt God, but anyway, yeah.
I hear you. Let's
Yeah.
talk about material. I, when people ask me about my material,
Yeah.
I got a couple of things to say. One, I'm constantly looking for the next special. So I don't have a Netflix special or a comedy special on HBO, but I kind of think of it that way, like, oh, I got this hour done. Now it's time to work on
Right.
the next hour. But my timeline is much slower than yours. Yours is like you got 9 to 11 minutes every flipping week.
Every week. Right.
So related to that is this fact: comics are not allowed to steal material. If I go out and do Dave Chappelle's jokes,
So,
that
right.
is totally not cool. But
Right.
teachers share lesson plans all the time, and that's one of the ways they survive. Where do priests fall in on that?
Oh, much more the latter. Absolutely share. Use someone else's material. Um, you hope that you'll attribute it to someone, that one will attribute it. Um, but I mean, a lot of sermons are quoting other theologians, other people. But what doesn't work is an entire sermon that someone else wrote and you're reading.
Right.
But it's but I and I've seen it and it happens, and you're kind of like, seriously, dude, you can't even take the time to write your own. No, don't do that. But I don't think it's a bad thing to, if there was something that someone else said that you just thought that worked, to say, here's a way a fellow priest put this,
Ah.
and quote them. Yeah,
And do you guys have like a? Is there a network where you can say, like teachers have Facebook
yeah,
pages, for example, where they put up lesson plans? Do priests have that?
yeah. A lot of priests have like a colleague group that they meet with every week to work on their sermon. And there are sermon websites where you can subscribe and get, again, fully written sermons. I would
Awesome.
hope the intent isn't to use them. The intent is to get material out of them. But
Right.
there are places you can subscribe and get these kinds of things. I don't subscribe to any of them, but you can.
Yeah, but it must be a relief if you're, like you mentioned, you maybe you're dealing with a lot of personal crises that week, and you just have a lot of, not your personal crises, you're
But
helping
crises,
others,
yeah.
and you're being a CEO, and then it must be a relief to go like, wait a minute, I can go to that source and get at least an outline.
Yeah, I mean, I think people find that helpful. I've never done it, but yeah, I think people find that helpful. Yeah.
Never?
Mm-mm. No, because I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't know. I've never found that particularly the way to go. And nothing against
What do
people
you
who
do
do. I
when you're
just,
desperate?
I speak extemporaneously really well. It's, it's one of my gifts, one of my strengths. And so I lean on that in those times.
So, like, are you walking up to that pulpit thinking, I'm going to talk about hope or whatever? Or,
Yeah, no, I mean, I've never walked up without anything to say. No,
all right.
no, but often, my habit though on Sunday mornings when I'm preaching is I get up about 4:45 and I go walk 3 or 4 miles, and it's not about it's exercise, and that's good, but on Sunday morning it's about the spiritual, mental sort of thinking through, preparing for the day and all that, and that's when that sort of gets it all crystallized and coming together.
That is so fun to hear. Some of my best keynotes, I would say all of my best performances have been when I've had time to have a long
Yeah,
walk beforehand.
totally. Yep,
Where you just, and I do you talk to yourself?
totally.
How, like, I'll
And I'm
talk
sure
out
people are
loud
going,
sometimes.
"What's he doing?" Because I'm doing, I'm like, and there's,
Right.
yeah.
So people will think you're bonkers if they see you.
What did you? Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, I'm practicing.
Yeah, yep. And I don't go for a walk dressed as in my clerical collar, for what it's worth. You don't do that.
Yeah, I would, I don't know, but that's what I'd recommend. Just saying.
Right.
All right, we're getting. Thanks for saying yes and joining me.
It's fun,
Grateful.
Brad. It's good to talk to you.
I like to ask every guest the same question. So, Rector of Bethesda by the Sea, Reverend James Harlan, what gives you hope?
It's a great question, because I think hope is one of the few things we actually, when everything else can be stripped away, it's about the only thing we have. And the way I would frame it is, um, I can be as selfish, arrogant, greedy, mean as any person around. And if, as messed up as I can be, have the capacity to do good, then everyone else does too. And that gives me hope.
Awesome. Can we just flesh that out though? Because that is a good one. You're saying that you're recognizing weaknesses in yourself, and you're like, well, if I'm able to overcome those weaknesses that I can label easily, then other people must be able to get over whatever they're dealing with.
Everyone has that goodness in them. Yeah, I think
Boy,
so.
that's really neat because as we're
Yeah,
recording this, this is, our country could not be more politically divided.
right.
And we're terrified about the virus, and we don't all agree on whatever the scientists are telling us. So put that fact I just told you, we're in a dark time on our planet, with what gives you hope. Like
Well, first of all, to clarify, Brad, um, science is not about belief. Science is about science, and I would say belief is something else. So I don't understand from a religious perspective people sort of saying, well, I don't believe the science, as if it's a matter of faith. It's not the same thing at all. Scientists know what they're talking about, and we just need to listen carefully and follow their directions when they're talking about something scientific. But anyway, that aside, yeah, I agree. And I think, I say that more easily than I believe it, Brad. I'm really angry at the state of our nation right now. And there are people that I have very little confidence are going to do a whole heck of a lot of good. And so for me, the hope isn't in that individual. It's in the human capacity for goodness. And again, to get theological about it, it's back to that notion that I would say, there's some sort of creative force in the universe, and part of what the nature of that creation is the goodness in humanity. And so somewhere, even in the worst, most despicable person, is that possibility. And how can we bring it out? I've been grateful to live a life with a lot of people who've seen more in me than I've seen in myself. At times I've been at my worst, and I hope I've been that for other people. And I think that for me is a source of hope. We can actually see more in others than they see in themselves, and draw something better out of one another.
you can't follow that, yo.
I don't know. There you go.
Yeah, you're the right guy in the right job, James Harlan.
I hope so. I try. And I love it. The funny thing is, here's the thing, Brad, you didn't ask me this, but I first felt called to be a priest in 5th grade, believe it or not. I had this sort of, I don't know how to describe it, spiritual experience, something in church in 5th grade. And that never really went away, even in crazy high school and college years. That was always sort of there. And I've never regretted it. There have been moments that have been awful, but I've never regretted doing this. I've loved it. It's all I've ever really imagined I would do. It's very weird.
Right person in the right job.
There you go.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful. James, hold on with me, everybody. Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Reverend James Harlan, Google him. Bethesda by the Sea, James Harlan. You'll find him, and you can see pictures of him in that fancy robe vestment thing.
You can.
Cool.
Yeah. With
Thanks,
some other people you'll recognize too. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's right.